Well, bankers on Wall Street are a little extra jolly this season as they give themselves a pretty nice gift. Money wrapped in a bow with a price tag of $91.44 billion. Because this year, that is the total sum of extra cash bankers will be receiving as holiday bonuses. In fact, it's so much money that bankers don't know what to do with it. The Financial Times has tried to help out by publishing a magazine called How to Spend It, giving bankers ideas for how to invest their money. But one group, called the Other 98%, has proposed another idea for where that money could go.
You know what Wall Street could do with that money instead of spending it on watches, gadgets, and cars? They could help homeowners.
The Other 98% is asking that bankers give their bonuses to the homeowners who no longer have homes. To talk about this initiative and how it might be mutually beneficial for both the homeless and Wall Street, I was joined earlier by the Other 98%'s Alexis Goldstein. I first asked her how bonuses are calculated on Wall Street and why they are such a big deal.
So they're a big part of compensation. These big Wall Street banks pay their employees a very high base salary, usually in the range of like $150,000 to $250,000. But then on top of that, they get this sort of performance bonus. And the way that they're tallied is there's a number of surveys, and the one that we were looking at was reported on by the New York Times, analysis of a consulting company, Johnson Associates. And they basically asked the top 8 U.S. banks how much money they had set aside for bonuses in 2013, and that's how we arrived at the $91.44 billion was a result of that survey.
Okay, and in another New York Times article, it actually predicted that bonuses were going to rise this year by 5 to 10%. I mean, can you talk about how it's possible that they now total almost $92 billion?
Well, it is crazy, right? Especially when you think about earlier this year, there was this Bloomberg article about how the government, there's like a government subsidy of $83 billion. So it's almost as if all of that government subsidy is just going right back into bonuses. But this is just the way that Wall Street has worked for a really long time. And we tried to parody that a little bit in the video because I used to work there. And I sort of played myself in this video we put out at other98.com. But, you know, they feel very justified. They feel like they're doing something for, I suppose, the greater good. And we take issue with that.
Right, and people should definitely check out that video. It is very funny. But what's incredible is that bankers have so much money, and I didn't know this, but you pointed it out, that Financial Times actually has a magazine that's called like How to Spend It or something.
It comes out 30 times a year,
30 times a year. It's incredible. But you are suggesting that there is a way for them to spend the money in a noble way, and that you know, they donate that money to the homeless. Can you talk a little bit about why the homeless are the people that really deserve that bonus this year?
So the foreclosure crisis caused 10 million people to be displaced from their homes, you know, multifamily homes, single-family homes, and so a lot of people haven't gotten back on their feet after that. And a lot of that was because the banks went into neighborhoods and sold these loans really aggressively. A lot of them were predatory. There's a lot of racial discrimination. And so we felt, listen, you've made all of these ill-gotten gains. Why don't you give the money back to the people that you took it from in the first place? And we put out a couple of proposals. One of them is this thing called the National Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which was something that came out of 2008 that's never been funded. There's a group called the National Low-Income Housing Coalition that says if we funded that trust fund for 10 years at $30 billion a year, we could end homelessness in America. So we're saying, hey, banks, why don't you fund the first 2 years of that? You'll still have several billion dollars left over.
It makes sense.
And it'll help right your wrongs.
Right. Well, I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that at the beginning of the year, 10 banks paid $8.5 billion to settle complaints that they improperly foreclose on homes. Can you first explain what it means to, you know, say you improperly foreclose on homes? I don't know that a lot of people understand that.
So that could mean a lot of things, but one of the things it means is every payment was made by the homeowner. They were never late. They made all of their payments, and because of some snafu or paperwork problem or mistake or perhaps outright malfeasance, they were foreclosed on anyway. So there was this big settlement where they tried to pay out cash payments to people who lost their home even though they made all their payments. Another reason it might have been illegal is because someone was approved for a loan modification, and so one side of the bank said, we're going to give you a lower monthly payment, but the other side of the bank wasn't communicating, so the right hand wasn't talking to the left hand, and they were foreclosed on anyway, even though they had negotiated a lower rate and were paying that and did nothing wrong. So those are just two examples.
And beyond dealing with the complaints and the lawsuits and all of that, were the bankers held accountable in any other way?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of fines, but for the most part, these fines are lower than the profits made in the crimes committed. And so I think it's just the cost of doing business. And until we either see, people going to prison or banks held accountable by saying you don't get to do business anymore for X months or X years, unfortunately, we're going to continue to see these problems. And that's why we're saying, listen, you shouldn't get to take these big dollars that you've gotten in this ill-gotten ways and give them to yourselves. You should give it back to the people that you've harmed.
Well, you're trying to sell this idea of giving the money to the banker, or excuse me, giving the money to the homeless people. From a PR standpoint for the bankers, can you talk a little bit about that too?
Well, right. So we sort of saw this as a win-win, right? I mean, I think that the banks would be doing the right thing, but they're also going to get a PR boost from this because nobody really likes them still. There's still this big fallout. There was a big Ask JP Morgan Twitter experiment that JP Morgan tried to do just a month or so ago where they said, hey, come ask our executives some questions. And they got epically trolled and people were asking funny questions, people were asking serious questions, but the sort of upshot of it was that people are still very angry. And so I think if they were to just do this very common sense thing and take one hit in 1 year, it would do a lot to boost their image. And instead they're spending all these money on advertising while they're still lobbying behind the scenes. Why don't they just do it for their own PR, let alone the sort of charitable nature of it?
Absolutely. Well, interestingly, I mean, you wanted to get 50,000 signatures on this petition. You already have 47,000, which is amazing that you're only 3,000 from your goal. So my question is sort of what's next? What's the next step?
Well, I think we're going to try to keep bringing the heat and telling the story. Maybe you'll see some creative actions in the new year when the banks actually get their bonuses, because they usually don't actually get them on Christmas. And I think we're just going to keep trying to shine a big, big spotlight on the fact that, listen, $83 billion a year in government subsidies and you're paying yourself $90 billion in bonuses, there's something really wrong with that
Well,
picture.
it's a noble cause, and we will follow up with you to see what happens. Thank you so much, Alexis Goldstein, Communications Director for the other 98%.
Thank you for having me.